Hello and welcome to Senploy Spotlight Sessions. I'm Amy Allen, I'm the founder and managing director of Senploy. The goal of the Spotlight Sessions is to shed some light on the incredible work being done in the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities sector, or SEN, and to generate some thought-provoking conversations and discussions around various aspects of the SEN sector. We'll be sharing successes, positive developments, and looking at some of the challenges in this expansive landscape. And we've selected individuals to join us in the sessions who are not only experts in their field, but they're trailblazers, advocators, and dedicated educators who, through their work, they're directly and indirectly positively affecting and impacting on the lives of children and young people. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce this session. In this Spotlight session, I'm delighted to be joined by Esme, Danielle and Lucy from Affinity Workforce. And I'm going to leave you guys to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you do. Cool. Esme, over to you.
Thank you. So I'm Esme, I'm the Chief Exec at Affinity Workforce. I've worked for Affinity and our associated brands for coming up to 13 years. Started on a secondary desk, but dealing with lots of schools with kind of various needs, specifically behavioural needs kind of back at that time. Okay. And worked up through the ranks to where I am.
Fantastic. So you've got some really good knowledge of the actual working the desk, and I think that moves on to what Lucy does now in her day job.
So I'm Lucy, I work in the Manchester office. I've been there 15 years, not that you would know, it's fine. And I originally started working with secondary schools. Okay. And then I worked with a couple of SEND schools, but then my real passion is working with those types of schools, so I completely shifted my focus. Okay. And that's who I look after now across the Manchester area.
Okay, and Danielle?
I'm Danielle, so I'm the divisional manager of our Manchester branch, so I look after all secondary and SEN business. And before that I was also a specialist SEN recruitment consultant. I've done that for the last 5 years. So
you've all got some really good experience from ground up, which is great, so you all know what you're talking about. I really want to focus first of all on how the landscape of SEN education recruitment has changed over the years and how it's evolved during your career. So can one of you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of alluded to it earlier. I worked a secondary desk 10 years or so ago now, and actually the majority of the needs that you dealt with within mainstream education in particular were behaviour needs. Yeah. I think the way that the landscape has changed is the needs within schools are much broader now. Yes. I think specifically the number of children in mainstream education with specialist needs has increased, and obviously we've seen a switch around of the availability of specialist provisions. So I think the skill set that a teacher or member of support staff needs now, whether they're working directly within an SEN environment or in mainstream education, is much broader. Okay. And probably set to change further as more and more children that have lived through the pandemic, etc., enter into the education system.
So are you guys seeing that as well from sitting on the desk and what the schools are demanding of you?
Yeah, I think there's been a huge increase in the understanding of SEN in mainstream and SEN schools, and then there's been a real push towards inclusion as well in mainstream schools, which has meant that you had to get kind of specialised staff in to do those roles.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you feel education recruitment needs to change to address the immediate requirement that we have in the sector?
I think there's two main things that we've had to do to adapt. One of them is around compliance. Okay. Because obviously we're bound by keeping children safe in education guidelines the same as schools are. But actually one of the things that we have to do, which is slightly vague, is to be able to show that the individual that we're recruiting is suitable to work in the job that you are placing them into. Yeah. So suitability has traditionally been shown by, here's a teaching qualification. Okay. Therefore they are suitable. Yeah. We are now having to look at broader ways of showing suitability, whether that be through referencing, through real life experience, for example, because obviously you can't get a specific SEN specialist teaching qualification or teaching assistant qualification. Yeah. And I think the other thing is investment in our candidates, which is always challenging for us as a temporary recruitment business because by virtue of the way the business is, these candidates aren't sticking with us maybe forever, maybe not even for much longer than 3 months. But we need to put the work in and the investment into the candidates to upskill them so that they understand the difference between working in a classroom, a mainstream classroom, working with one child potentially with additional needs, or a whole group of children. So we're really having to put investment into candidate CPD to upskill them, and the work that the consultants do around understanding where they are placing the candidates and being able to convey that out to the candidates before they place them, so that they're prepared and they know what they're walking into.
So you said, Esme, that they may only stay with you for a couple of months. Why is that?
So people do temporary work for different reasons.
Okay.
So we have, we've got a really broad range of candidates that have been with us 15 years, and candidates that just do it as a stopgap.
Okay.
I think the other thing in this particular moment in time is, if you've got a candidate that does a really good job in a school, the school wants to have them permanently on their books. So we may put a huge amount of time and investment into upskilling a candidate that ultimately then disappears for all the right reasons. But not long after we've started placing them.
Okay. And it's in the news, it's all over the news about the teacher recruitment and retention crisis. We all know about that, and how many people are leaving the education sector, and that the trainees are coming through, and then they're leaving very, very quickly. Trainee teachers' rates are at an all-time low. So at your partner schools, the schools that you deal with, what are the biggest recruitment challenges they're facing right now?
I mean, there simply are not enough staff for the roles that are coming in.
Okay.
SEN is very different to mainstream, and what I do find, as we mentioned it before, is we look at different things now. So for example, with teaching assistants, some of my schools that I work with, it's different needs, such as social, emotional, mental health, pupils with PMLD, people that have experience away from the classroom, so carers, personal experience with people that have children with autism, children with social, emotional, mental health. A lot of the time they're far more suited to someone who does have the teaching assistant qualification for the roles that we're looking for.
So it's using that lived experience to actually transfer into their workplace.
Yes, Okay. So that side of it is something that we find schools are more open to now. Rather than just looking at, originally, because I've worked here so long, it would be simply where we would look down the list for what schools you've been in, and if there were no schools on there, we would disregard that CV. Okay. Whereas now it's very much, care background, working, with people with autism, Alzheimer's, lots of different areas that are more equipped to do a better job.
I'm a firm believer that skills are transferable. At the end of the day, as long as you've got the right personality fit and the character fit, then skills can be learned. And I think that is really important. What do you feel are the key barriers to attracting people to work in SEND?
Again, there's quite a lot.
Education in general, it's probably what would be quite widely said that it's financial barriers is one of the main things. Particularly with graduates that can potentially have a job across many different sectors. There is still, particularly in the support roles, the salaries are relatively low. I think specifically in support roles the salaries are behind the national average, so that's always going to be a barrier, because obviously there's only so far that passion and can take you. Ultimately, people need to live and earn a living so that they can live the lifestyle they want to live. So I think that will always be a challenge and a barrier. One of the other barriers, I think, is still that we don't have any specific SEN focused qualifications to come into teaching. So you have to train as a primary teacher or a secondary teacher. You'll probably then do your placements through your training in a primary or a secondary school. So maybe there isn't an obvious route for people that are passionate about SEN and they almost then just get sucked in, for want of a better word, to the mainstream education system, because that was where they started their placement. Whereas actually, who knows how many of the teachers that are recruited actually, if there was a specialist course available for them to take, may well take it.
So from the outset, doing a course rather than coming in into the industry and being a teacher, you come in as the SEN teacher. Because as people go through their career, to jump on you there, I guess people get a bit more time poor as they progress through their career, with other things taking over. So is it a case then that they just don't have time to then train to be a SEN specialist or become a SENCO childcare or whatever route they want to go down in that SEN specialism.
Well, and much like the private sector, you get some schools that are run better than others.
Yeah.
So, you get a really good head teacher that's maybe passionate about SEN, may support you, give you the guidance, give you the funding to push you down that route.
Yeah.
Actually, you get a head teacher that isn't as passionate, doesn't have as much funding, doesn't have as much time maybe to support you, and you end up pigeonholed into that role. So there's an element of which school you end up at, or you might go to a mainstream school where there are a lot of pupils with SEN and be exposed to something. So, but I think because there isn't a direct route, we are sort of, it's in the lap of the gods to a degree in terms of which direction people go.
So with the job that you do, Danielle and Lucy, are you having the conversations with teachers about transferring over to SEN?
Yeah, I think both teachers and teaching assistants really, because a lot of them are either trained in primary or secondary. It's not that they're not particularly interested, but they might maybe stumble across it if they are working in a school that's got particularly high SEN within that school, and then they kind of start considering it a bit more.
So you're actually facilitating potential career changes for people, as well as doing the job that you do. It's opening their eyes to what else is out there within their industry sector, which is great.
A lot of our support staff particularly just seem to assume that it's easier to go into mainstream primary or mainstream secondary, but once we've kind of spoken to them and kind of given them a bit more information about their specific schools, and they've gone in to try it even just for the day, a lot of them sometimes will go in and they just won't want to go back to mainstream because they found it so rewarding and they felt like they've made kind of more of a positive impact. So
you change your approach with your clients as well, don't you? So you're sort of you will discuss experience more so necessarily than something on a CV, and have people in on kind of trial basis more so in a way that you wouldn't, as that a mainstream school might not be as open to that, because they want a maths teacher that's qualified in maths, whereas actually maybe in an SEN provision they're more open to having that conversation.
Something we do find as well is that a lot of the people we speak to just don't think that they're qualified to work in SEN. So they might have personal experience, they might have a family member who's got autism, and they ask and they say, I don't think I'm qualified to work in SEN schools, but in actual fact they're probably more qualified than those people.
Absolutely. That happened to me on holiday. I was talking to a lady and she was telling me what she did, which was work in the nursery, and she said we're seeing more and more children coming through with SEN, and she said, but I've not got a qualification in SEN, so I'd really like to work in a primary school, but I don't think I'd be able to. And I said, you don't need to, just you've got the experience. If you're doing it, then you are gold dust. So it's people like that. Maybe we need to be educating people more on getting into working in SEN. And that does actually bring me on to my next question quite nicely, of how we as education professionals, how can we get more people working in SEN?
I mean, I think a lot of it is referrals and word of mouth and speaking to people. I mean, something you just touched on before, so many people don't know they are qualified and able to do these roles. And so many people will say, well, I haven't been in a school environment, or I haven't, it's out of the norm of what they've done, but it doesn't mean that they can't do it and they're not more equipped than other people. That's a conversation we have constantly with people, where I had someone last week who she'd worked on a mental health ward at a hospital, and before that she had worked in an Alzheimer's care home, and she was desperate to get into a nurture role, which is working with the pupils with social, emotional, mental health. And she said, what do I need to do? Do I need to get voluntary work? Do I need to, is there a course I can do? And I said, your experience would be more than transferable. And she's in there now, she's absolutely thrilled, it's lovely to be able to do that for people, and the school are also thrilled. It's great.
So what's quite interesting there is I see a lot of people saying, how can I get experience in this sector? I really want to do this job, I need experience. Is it strictly true that you need to have experience to be able to work in SEN? No,
and I think you touched upon it earlier around being our role as education recruiters, being facilitators. And we're called education recruitment consultants, and we talk all the time about being consultative. And there's probably an argument that within SEN that is where we need to be the most consultative, because that is really where we are using our skills and experience to make a judgment. whether it's experience, whether it's qualification, whether it's lived but to facilitate that, and I think that's what these guys do.
Absolutely.
Do really well.
Sometimes it's literally just something as simple as having similar interests to the people that is looking for support. Like, so if someone likes football, or people just being able to send someone in, like a sports coach, for example, might never have worked in a school before, but they kind of go outside at lunchtimes, play football with them, and that's how they kind of build the trust and that relationship with the pupils.
And I think that's really valid, and I'm really grateful that you've brought that out today, because I think there probably are quite a few people out there that think they need to go and get experience or not be paid and do a voluntary role before they can actually be eligible to work in our sector, and it's great that we're dispelling that myth. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Slightly controversial one, what are your thoughts on the salary levels in SEND?
I think the salary levels, I mean, it is controversial, but I think the conversation across the education sector as a whole is around the salary levels. I think the government have gone some way to correcting that with teachers. Frankly, the pay scales for non-teaching and support staff haven't really changed. I think multi-academy trusts can have an important role to play in that, because obviously they aren't governed in the same way by local authority pay scales and teachers' paying conditions. But then you enter into the argument around, you don't want sort of the multi-academy trusts almost nicking all of the best candidates out of local authority maintained schools because they've got that bit more flexibility. But I think the level that teaching assistants and support staff are paid at in particular will need to evolve with the times if you want to continue attracting and keeping hold of the best people.
So what are the salary ranges we're seeing at the moment?
Literally sort of a lot of the problem is a lot of the roles also they are part, because it's to do with the funding in the schools. So you could have someone, £14,500 a year, that is obviously a part-time role, up to what, sort of 27, 28 as an absolute maximum if they're kind of really experienced and have worked their way up through the scales. So
obviously there's like the SEN allowance and stuff as well, which does really help.
So it's I think the national average salary is 27,000. So if you think about it in the context of that, you have to be towards the top end of the pay scale to really be getting anywhere near kind of the average.
And is this at the support teaching assistant sort of level as well, that you are paid more if you're more experienced? Because I'm just thinking of some of the adverts that we have on Senploy at the moment, and they could be asking for people who don't have any experience, and that's paying the same amount of money as someone who is at level 3 or HLTA level. So what's the disparity there? Why is that disparity there between someone who's inexperienced and someone who's experienced?
Potentially the people that are looking, the job ads on Senploy are trying to attract are potentially temporary workers through agencies. Obviously, where there is a skills shortage at the moment, particularly for temporary work, we are seeing all of the average kind of pay rates for candidates going up. But obviously within a permanent role being recruited directly to a school, the schools are bound to their own pay policy.
Of course.
So what we're starting to see is, whereas traditionally temporary workers might have been paid slightly below whatever is in the school's pay policy, those pay rates are coming up to match, or even in cases exceed. I mean, I don't know what you guys are paying exactly for your teaching assistants today, but it's certainly not national minimum wages, which is what it potentially used to be through agency.
Okay. And I think that's quite important, isn't it? I was looking at something this morning on social media where someone was saying, I really want to get into SEND, and how do I do that? And someone actually had replied and said, go to an agency because they pay more and the application process is a lot easier. So, and I'll come back to that in a minute because there are a few more questions I want to explore first. But I would really like to know, for anyone that is looking to get into SEND, what would you say is the best thing they can do? What would you recommend?
I mean, literally send me a CV.
My email address.
Because the thing is, even if a lot of people are they are able to do this role. If you've got a passion and you're saying this is what I want to do, you're already interested in it. And the main thing is people's attitude, your enthusiasm, the want to do it, something driving you. That's the main thing. That's the thing that's going to make you a success in that arena, quite frankly. So if for any reason, they would need some more experience, or they would need, I can direct them into, you know, what I'd suggest they could do, really.
I was going to say, just do it. I was reading an article. I was reading an article, what makes a good SEN teacher, I think it was. And it was like communication skills, creativity. And I just thought, this is just describing a good teacher.
Yeah.
It's not described, like, there's no specific skill here that's any different to just a really good teacher.
Yeah.
So it is literally a case of just do it, and like you said, good to dispel maybe some of the myths and around the barriers that are there, because I think you were saying earlier, the schools are so much more open now to looking at experience and looking at interests rather than just no, you haven't got a qualification, I'm going to push your CV to one side.
Okay.
So yeah, just crack on.
So if anyone's CV crossed your desk, you would consider them for an SEND role?
I would have a conversation with anybody.
Yeah,
quite frankly, yes.
I think that's so important to know.
Like 100% schools aren't looking for a finished product. Like a lot of the schools, majority that we work with, are so willing to support people with CPD and help them gain like more experience and extra qualifications, and they literally just want people with the right attitude who do have like the passion to work with SEN.
Thanks, Danielle. That is interesting because it's brought me quite nicely into my next line of questioning, which is around professional development and how you as a group at Affinity Workforce, what training and development do you offer to your candidates? And is this before they start working for you or once they're working for you? What do you do with that?
Well, so we've actually just launched Affinity Academy, which is our own internal
nice
learning.
Little plug there, Esme.
I was going to say, you've led me quite nicely into plugging this.
Go for it.
It's our own internal L&D division, and it's focused on both L&D internally for our internal employees and looking at CPD for candidates. So the only mandatory training we have to give to candidates before they start in schools is safeguarding training.
Okay.
So that's the only training they have to have whilst going through the registration process before we can place them.
Okay.
And actually, interestingly, the CPD that we have kind of looked at as part of the Affinity Academy is all focused on either specialist needs or behaviour. So we did a pilot project last year, and actually it was the staff that were most interested in attending were all the staff that were working in support roles. We said, what do you want to know about, what do you want to learn about? So we've engaged with ex-head teachers of primary schools and SEN environments, and they're, how do you deal with managing behaviours? How do you make the classroom more inclusive? That sort of training, which is offered as free webinars, which obviously comes with its challenges. It's not as good as face-to-face training. But it's something that will give, again, coming back to these guys being like facilitators, give these people an insight into what it's like working in those schools. Yeah,
that's really important. And are other agencies doing that, or is this quite unique to you? I
mean, every agency will say they do it, and some agencies do it better than others. But yeah, the particular, I think the way that we are trying to specialise into working with SEN is probably a little bit unique.
Okay.
But that's through experience of what we're being asked for, more so than anything else. And I think it comes back to the volume of children in mainstream education that are now on EHCPs, and teachers not having the specific qualification. So there is that kind of gap where you've got teachers and support staff that need the support to learn those skills.
I think it's so important, isn't it, to support those people that are out doing that job. There are children of the future at the end of the day. They need to be nurtured in a way that's correct and proper. And if you guys are supporting that, then I think that is important. And that does actually bring me quite nicely into my next area of questioning, which is around the legal and regulatory changes. I worked in recruitment years and years and years ago. And I've seen a lot of changes since then. So what would you say have been the key legislation and regulatory changes within the education sector over the last few years?
There's not actually, the biggest whole-scale change to regulation was around the AWR regulations, which came in back in 2010. Obviously, keeping children safe in education is updated every year, and with that there are some, but there's not really been kind of a massive whole-scale change that's impacted us. I think within schools there's certainly been I know there was like the government green paper around inclusion and there's certainly been some changes that have impacted them, which have then kind of come to us as a byproduct, because obviously these topics are becoming more important for them to look at, and things like the way that they report their pupil premium and how that's making an impact.
Yes.
So they're not things that directly affect us, but we kind of end up being impacted as a downstream supplier effectively.
Wasn't there something during COVID whereby you no longer needed to meet face to face with the candidates?
Yes.
And you were able to then do it remotely?
Yeah.
Has that stayed in the sector, or have we reverted back to how it was?
That has stayed, yeah.
I think that's hugely important, because people coming out, if they're working in a school, to come out and see you guys and have an interview and go through that process takes time. So now you're able to clear people a lot more quickly because this has been implemented?
Yes. There's also been, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because of the pandemic, we've, since the pandemic, you can't get a DBS through very quickly.
Yeah.
And actually, it's specific to SEN, you need a candidate to be on a child and adult workforce DBS, potentially, if they're working with older students. And then we would need to potentially get a separate DBS if they were only working in primary schools, because of GDPR, we'd only be able to see a child workforce. So there's sort of complications that have come downstream. I think on the point of interviewing specifically though, but you guys can probably speak to it better than I can, but the level of relationship that you can build when you bring somebody in for an interview, you can't really match that.
No, I
online.
mean, we still see everyone, but it's not face to face, it's on Zoom.
Okay.
We do that with absolutely everybody that we bring on. But yeah, it isn't the same as having someone come meet you, and the effort they have to make to come in to meet you and fit that in with their schedule. Sometimes you have more commitment, I suppose, if someone is having to come down, they're very serious in wanting a longer term job, really, if they've had to rearrange their schedules to come meet with you.
It's almost like they're serious, if they take the time out to come and meet you.
You can see if someone turns up and they're quite nervous, or and immediately these guys are thinking, is that going to work in that school? Because actually you can't present like that in that sort of an environment. Or even like dress code, we probably have to change how we dress when we go into some of our schools, because if you turn up in a suit, that's not, and it's like those sort of cues that you can pick up over Zoom, and it does help us with speeding through the process. But there are some cues that I think you guys, particularly in working with SEN schools, pick up on when you meet people, when you kind of get a feel for them in a way that you can't remotely.
And I suppose that's really important with the SEN, with children that have SEND, because you are going to be building that relationship potentially one-to-one, so it's got to be a really good match with the person that you are putting to work with that child. So good points. Your client schools, the attitudes that they've got towards using recruitment agencies, when I speak to some schools, it's, we need to reduce our agency spend. That's their number one focus. And I wonder whether it's, I don't know how positive that is, because in my mind, all schools need to use agency, A, to satisfy that immediate demand, and B, they need to have that supply of individuals ready, and also as a talent pool coming through, and the temp to perms. So there's lots of reasons why you would use an agency. What do your schools, do they use you reluctantly, or are they quite happy to be using you?
I think things have changed dramatically since we all kind of started out in recruitment. I think it used to be that was the opinion of agencies. However, there's been a massive shift. Like, it's not like we're calling them just purposely to call them. It's we're calling them because we're providing a solution for something that they've really struggled with themselves. And like a lot of the schools, like one of the schools we went to yesterday, had said like, we're really kind of struggling. We see CVs getting sent over, we've not even got time to look at those CVs. So I think it's like a massive time saver for them, and I think they really do see the value of agencies now, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. When I first worked here all those years ago, we did have strict, it was call times basically. You had to ring 30 calls in the morning. 30 calls between 10 and 12. So basically, it was effectively your aim was 90 calls a day. And there was that was what you had to do. It wasn't a case of, and if you didn't do that, you had to be answerable to why you'd not done that. If I still worked in that way, I'm absolutely sure none of my schools would want to speak to me anymore, if I'm honest.
Still they do that now,
No, we've taken all the wallboards down. It used to literally be your name flashing up.
Flashing.
No ringing the bell on a placement or anything like that.
So it has changed massively. And I think they know now that we tailor how we are to what they need. So I do have some schools that ring me at 7:15 and I will tell you what I need. So if I rang them at 7:15, they'd be absolutely livid that I'd rang them at 7:15. So with them, I will text you, I've got this person, this person, this person. Yeah. And then if they want anyone, they'll ring me or text me back. It's since COVID, it's changed so dramatically. Yeah. A lot of it is messages, emails. I do a lot of my bookings with people via email, which is, I never would have done that before. Yeah. But everyone's different, and it's the same as SEN, it's not one size fits all, and you tailor it to what works best for that individual and that individual school.
And I think that's quite a broad brush, isn't it? Oh, we don't like agencies. What they actually mean by that is we don't like 90 calls a day and people charging a margin that isn't transparent, and when we think we're getting ripped off. Yes. And again, coming out of COVID, one of the big things was, for the first time ever, the Department for Education was engaging with us as the agency and saying, you know, we recognise that we have got this massive issue with staffing schools, obviously because so many people had COVID, and at the time you had to isolate, etc. So they recognised that they had this problem and that agencies could support them with that. So we would have calls with the DFE where they would almost go through region by region and say, what is your capacity? And if you have availability, we will go and reach out to our schools in that area and tell them to come to you. Okay. Which is, you know, a paradigm shift. That would never have happened previously. Yeah. And actually, the role again of multi-academy trust in that. So it's a sector that is changing. And don't get me wrong, there are still some schools that don't like using agencies, but it's almost the same, I guess, we're like, oh, you know, you don't like estate agents. It's kind of got that same negative connotation to it, but actually, I'm sure the estate agency industry's changed since that opinion was formed, but it's sort of, a bit of a long-standing thing that we need to work to evolve through, I guess.
And if that's coming top down from the Department for Education, more schools are going to listen to that and hopefully see using agency in a more positive light, because you do such a good and essential job. So I think you're brilliant. In terms of sort of the candidate opinions around using recruitment companies, what do you feel those misconceptions, I would use that word, are, and how can they be addressed?
Sometimes, unfortunately, I don't think they are misconceptions. I think the experience the candidate gets is very individual to the consultant that they're working in, the school potentially they're placed in, the quality of the job that person does. Yeah. And that's our job as an agency, to make sure we're giving our employees the right training. Because actually, if you're a temporary worker and you get let down for a job, or Lucy sends you into an SEN school but doesn't tell you it's an SEN school, and you turn up and it's something you're not expecting, you're going to obviously
rabbit in the headlights.
You have a very, very bad experience. So
that would never happen.
No, that would never happen. But yeah, I think, and that's probably the biggest challenge to overcome, is making sure that as an industry, all of the consultants that work across that industry are, doing it for a genuine passion, maybe for SEN, or at least trying to do the job, in a transparent and kind of honest manner. But probably one of our biggest challenges is there are, we've got over 200 employees. You're never going to know if one of them is potentially doing a bad job until you get a complaint. So that's I think one of our sector's biggest challenges is to get the way that we approach it right as much as anything. Okay,
and we have touched on this briefly, but I want to think about how we can change that mindset that agency spend is a luxury. The cost per hire is too expensive. How can we change that? Because I've thought about this, and I've thought, if you think about the cost of a permanent placement directly, so they're going to advertise the school, they're going to do the whole recruitment process, the people involved in that process. That could be, 2 or 3 people, one doing an interview, one looking at the application forms, all that sort of thing. Then you're going to do the induction process, and all that training, and then that person might leave within 3 months. But if you're to use an agency to recruit, surely is that not a more cost-effective option?
And we do it. We've got this. I mean, I've used this since I think I said to you earlier. I've not worked on a desk for about 8 years, but we used to have this little table where it said, candidate's salary plus NI plus £2,000 to advertise on whatever, plus equals in 6 months they'll have cost you this. Yes. Have them through us for this rate, and actually you could actually physically show them that the cost was the same. And I think the other big thing, coming back to the Department for Education, is they have backed the Crown Commercial Service Framework, which has been running for coming up to 6 years or so now. But part of one of the main selling tools on that is agencies have to show you their margin.
Okay.
So yeah, you commit to a maximum markup, which is in pounds and pence, and you can't charge anything more than that markup. And actually, you transparently show that to the client that's using you. So that again is really kind of changing the market, because actually, if a school is concerned that they're not getting the best quality of service, or they are being overcharged, if they buy it through the framework, they can, they've got that sort of guarantee and that level of safety.
Yes.
And I think over time that will evolve and again change, because not all agencies are on the framework.
Yeah.
Which again, we would say to the school, well, why aren't they on it? Why aren't they? What have they got to hide?
Do you get awarded that being part of that framework, or is it something you buy into?
You bid, it's a you bid it.
Okay.
So it's a 4-year contract, 2 years with a 2-year extension. So we've just had the first 4 years, and we're 1 year into the second iteration.
Okay.
But
awesome.
yeah, you have to meet certain criteria. You're scored on pricing.
Right.
So I can't remember the criteria, but essentially if you're too expensive, you don't get on.
Okay.
It's to do with the median price range, but also safeguarding.
Yeah.
So you have to have one of the safeguarding accreditations. There's slightly different compliance and auditing criteria.
Okay.
But yeah, you essentially go through the procurement process and are awarded a place on the framework.
So it's a safe pair of hands that schools know that they're getting when they come to you guys.
Theoretically, yeah.
I think that the fact that information is available to candidates as well, because one of the misconceptions that they have is obviously that we take maybe a cut of what they should be earning, but the fact that they can see what we kind of charge schools is a massive help, really.
Do you still do that bidding thing with candidates? If they say, I've been offered another job and they're paying me an extra 20 pence an hour or £1 an hour, does that still happen? I used to work in recruitment many years ago, and we did have that.
It does happen.
Yeah.
I feel like obviously throughout COVID, the market, there was a lot of new kind of businesses that set up where they were obviously a lot smaller, less overheads, and they were able to kind of pay more, charge less. And obviously we find it now when we've got candidates in some of Lucy's schools who obviously there might be candidates there from other agencies, and they talk, and then they kind of request more money.
They get on the phone to you and say, so-and-so's being paid
Candidates
more.
are much clearer on their own boundaries as well.
Okay.
I will, I'm not going to go to work for less than X.
Yes.
Whereas before, maybe it was a bid because, the agency would start here and then the candidate would be trying to bid them up. Whereas it's kind of switch now. The candidate's like, look, we know we're in an industry where there aren't enough of us.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to go to work and be underpaid. And actually, the schools are very open to that conversation as well.
So schools are willing to pay a little bit more to get the right staff.
As long as they know the money's going to the candidate.
Yeah.
So if you say I need to put your charge rate up £20, but that's because I'm paying the candidate £20 more.
Yeah.
Not a problem.
Okay.
So you have to have that level of transparency, and then they may well ask the candidate, did your pay go up £20? So as long as again you're being transparent and honest, it's not an issue. But if you are just trying to put £20 on and keep it, then you're in trouble.
That's naughty.
Yeah.
Are there people out there that would do that?
Not in our company.
No, of course not.
I mean, yeah, of course there are.
It's business, I suppose.
Yeah, of course there are. And can I hand on heart say that there's never been anyone in this organisation that's not done it? No, because there's lots of people within the organisation, and obviously, you don't look at every single placement they make, but certainly our ethos and values, and we've really aligned ourselves closely to the CCS framework. We've been one of the education companies that's probably aligned ourselves most closely to them.
Okay.
So that's kind of a big part of our values and our ethos moving forward. Is like we want to be transparent and honest, and we're kind of backing it up, I guess.
I think it's a sector that demands transparency and honesty, doesn't it, and complete candour.
For us as well, obviously working with SEN, we really see the value in the work that our candidates do. So we wouldn't kind of go in and just offer the lowest pay possible to make a higher margin. It's we see the value in what they do, and we want to make sure that they're paid fairly from the start.
And to keep them, if they're a good candidate and they're working really hard, and you want to keep them long term. Yeah, that's great. So we all work in the education recruitment field. I'm slightly different, but still very much part of that. How can we collectively, and other education recruiters as well, how can we work collaboratively to improve the SEND provision out there and what we're doing for the SEND sector?
think discussing it, doing things like we're doing now.
Yeah.
I think we've got a role to play in terms of agencies, like the way that we advertise, where we advertise, what we're advertising for. And I think the other thing, we touched on it in conversation earlier, but I was thinking about this on the way here today, like what can we do as an organisation to maybe encourage SEN students into work? Can we offer work experience? Brilliant. Can we use our skill set as recruiters to go in and deliver training as an added value service where we show employability skills, life skills basically. And we did a piece of work my sister's actually a chef, which was how we managed to do this. She's got her own restaurant, so we did a piece of work where we took a group of students into her restaurant to learn how to cook for the day. And it's doing things like that, I think, and I think as an education recruitment sector, we have had to, and we are definitely starting to get better at kind of that corporate social responsibility, for want of a better word, but giving back to the industry that we serve. And that's probably something that the whole of the education sector has maybe learnt from SEN. You've been going to awards evenings and all sorts for years, haven't you?
Yeah, I love them. It's great. No, it's true, they're great. I mean, they were talking about that in a school we went to yesterday. It's an ASD school, and they've actually managed to employ 3 of their former students within the school. And it's like incredible. It's, I mean, I'm privileged that I get invited to certain things. So for one of my big schools, every May I do the year 10 work experience interviews with the pupils.
Brilliant.
And I only do that with one school, and they invite me every year. It's like one of my favourite days. But it'd be quite nice to like maybe roll that out to different schools as well, so that it's a service that we can offer, because with their first interview it can really make a difference to them before they do their work experience. And it's things like that, really.
That is something that we've actually started doing. So we are booked onto a couple next month. I think it is year 11, basically kind of employment evening, where we're obviously they can't kind of come and work for us, but we can educate them about careers in education, in schools, and then we're setting up like an open workshop for CV writing, interview preparation and things like that. So
hugely valuable life skills. We did it recently. We had someone who is on the spectrum that came and did some work for us, and she did the best job. And I have to say, I felt great having given her the opportunity as well. And I now know that I could give her a reference and she would go on to get a really good job somewhere. So I think there's that self-satisfaction of, you're facilitating something that's really good.
Yeah, definitely.
Can we address very quickly what the future of education recruitment looks like, in your opinion?
The $1 million question.
Isn't it?
Well, for me, the biggest challenge that I foresee for education, not just recruitment, is the skills shortage and the candidate shortage. And I do wonder, in 3 years' time, if we continue to miss our targets, or the DFE continues to miss targets in terms of getting more people into education, what happens next? Because we really are feeling it, and if we're feeling it, the schools are really feeling it. You've got schools that are closing classrooms and are unable to staff their schools, and that was unheard of before the pandemic. I'm not saying we filled every single booking that came to us, but they would find someone from somewhere to do it. And that is really kind of front and centre in terms of policy change. Like, that is the problem that needs to be fixed.
Okay.
In my view, I don't know if you guys have got a different view.
No, I'd agree wholeheartedly with that.
Yeah.
So I think in summary, we need more people to look at this as a career, education as a career. Don't just try it and leave, please. It's something to invest in for your own future and for the future of our children and young people.
Yeah.
Great. I think we've covered some really good stuff there. And I'd really like to thank you all for coming along today. And hopefully I'll see you again soon.
No, thank you. It's been great.
Thank you.
Cheers.